If you caught any of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial today, you watched the testimony of a young man who has serious guts. This case has been a disaster for his prosecutors, and it was almost over. The prosecution had already rested without any real big moments. Even political analysts on liberal TV networks were indicating things were looking very good for the 18-year-old defendant. And then today, Kyle Rittenhouse decided to take the stand. It's a huge risk, one that most logical defendants would only take as a last resort in a case that they thought they were likely to lose. Doing so here, in some ways, was legally psychotic, unless you have nothing to hide. And that most certainly seems true of Kyle Rittenhouse, a young man who clearly still has some trauma to process in regards to what he went through last August. And today on the stand, he broke down.
There were three people right there.
Take a deep breath, Kyle.
That's where I run.
We're going to just take time for our break anyway. You can just relax for a minute, sir.
That's a very vulnerable moment. That's an embarrassing moment for him, no doubt, at 18 years old. And yet, it was pounced on by many in this country that want to see that young man's head in a noose. In a since-deleted tweet, a guy named Michael Tracy, a nobody with a blue checkmark who calls himself a roving journalist, wrote, "Whoever counseled Rittenhouse to get on the stand and stage an obvious fake crying meltdown is a total moron." Well, the total moron is the guy who can't spot authentic human emotion. This wasn't Obama wiping the fake tear while talking about Sandy Hook. I actually thought Rittenhouse was going to throw up at one point during that. He would have to be among the best actors in all of Hollywood to fake that kind of emotion. But he's not an actor. He's a kid. He's a kid who made the mistake of trying to save a community whose leaders had abandoned it. The left, of course, sees a crazed terrorist who crossed state lines, even though it was only about 20 minutes from his house, with a semi-automatic rifle to kill protesters who just want peace and unity. That's actually what these people think. Imagine actually believing their narrative when you see the video of what was happening in these communities last summer. How much reality do you have to ignore to be that dense? Half the country's that dense, it would seem. According to his own testimony, Rittenhouse is a swimmer. He's a lifeguard, in fact. He's a young man who works with first responders, a young man who wants to be a nurse.
I was a police explorer for Grays Lake Police Department, and I was a firefighter EMT cadet for Antioch Fire Department. I am a certified lifeguard and swim instructor. I am certified in Stop the Bleed, CPR, AED, automatic external defibrillator, and basic life support.
18 years old. And that's what he's into. When I was 18, I was just trying to find alcohol. Does that sound like a guy who drove to Kenosha, Wisconsin to just slaughter people? Really? This kid wanted to help others so much he went to protect a city that was under assault. And he brought his medical supplies with him. After Kenosha's pathetic and spineless capitulating leaders abandoned their citizens and resigned to let Kenosha burn to the ground as if it would be some great catharsis for the BLM movement. The idiots that run that city. They should be on trial. Well, some Americans aren't going to just stand by and let that happen. Some Americans saw what we all watched last summer, as disgusted as we all were, and went into action and did something about it. A day before the night in question, Kyle Rittenhouse went out and cleaned graffiti off the walls of a high school near the Kenosha County Courthouse. Is that something that a white supremacist terrorist would do? Really? I wouldn't do that. That's the kind of guy he is. But according to Democrats, the president, and the media, Rittenhouse is a white supremacist. He's a terrorist. It's pretty funny how Rittenhouse used so much restraint, though, on that night. Very unusual for a terrorist. You don't see a lot of restraint from them normally. A number of people provoked this young man that night when he was fully armed, far more than he actually shot. Nobody cares about those facts, though. No, they labeled him a terrorist and they move on. But then those pesky facts do always come out in trials. Trials never seem to go the way the left wants them to because the facts actually come out, and facts piss these people off to no end. And this case has been a disaster. And Rittenhouse's testimony was so powerful, even over at CNN, they were admitting a couple times today, it seems like he's probably innocent.
It was a risky move by the defense team to put him on the stand. It always is to put a defendant on. But I think in this case, given how the evidence had been presented by the prosecution, that it is working for the defense.
It does seem like he has a plausible case of self-defense. And, you know, if it were illegal to be an idiot, the jails would be even freer, even more crowded than they are now.
Jeffrey Toobin calling anybody an idiot is just basically hilarious in itself. Lubin Toobin. For Rittenhouse, taking the stand ended up being a brilliant move, though. Despite his best efforts today, prosecutor Thomas Binger could not trip up this young man during his cross-examination. He's not a very good attorney at all. He's a terrible prosecutor. Binger used every trick in the book to make his case. He tried in the beginning very hard to annoy Rittenhouse, try to piss him off, hoping he'll just get frustrated and say something really dumb, being an 18-year-old. Didn't work at all. Rittenhouse was cool and collected. Then he showed how little he knew about guns and had Rittenhouse and the judge actually correcting him, which was priceless. Then he resorted to insinuating that because Rittenhouse has played video games that every kid on this frickin' planet has played, he obviously went out there to just slaughter everyone that he saw.
Isn't it true when you would hang out with Dominic Black, you'd play Call of Duty and other first-person shooter video games?
Sometimes.
Isn't one of the things people do in these video games try and kill everyone else with your guns?
Yeah, in the video game, it's just a video game. It's not real life.
You can see the prosecutor pretty desperate here. Watch this next one, asking why Rittenhouse was even armed with a weapon at all during riots.
You indicate that you have your AR-15 to protect yourself, correct?
Yes.
And you indicate that you're going to run out there and treat anyone who needs medical help, correct?
Yes.
If you didn't think there was friction with the crowd and you're out there trying to help, why did you expect there'd be any danger?
From the previous nights when I saw people being assaulted.
Yeah, maybe all the fires and the burning and the people getting beat up and the chaos that was this country, maybe that was why you brought some protection. The idea of personal protection, of course, is completely lost on this prosecutor. Of the 300 million or so guns in this country, how many do you think have ever actually been fired anywhere except a gun range? A fraction so small you could barely see it. People bring guns hoping they'll never have to use them. That's why people buy guns. It's for protection. If you have a gun, hopefully you'll never have to use it. Rittenhouse brought a gun because he knew he was going somewhere extremely dangerous. He did make a dumb move as a kid to go into that thing. If I was his father, I would have never let it happen. But it's common sense. When you go into a situation like that, you bring protection, and it's also a Second Amendment right, as much as the left hates it. The prosecution has got so desperate that they attempted to bring in previously inadmissible evidence in an effort to try and prove their case, because it's on national TV, and Binger's going to be reamed for losing this case, and everybody's going to hate him. So now he's desperately trying to win. As a result, the Rittenhouse defense made a request for a mistrial with prejudice, they said, a stipulation necessary to prevent prosecutors themselves from deliberately ruining this case in order to get another crack at Rittenhouse in a second trial, since they know they already screwed this one up. The defense's request is based on the prosecution's violations of Rittenhouse's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent by referring to his previous silence during the trial. You're not supposed to do that. And today the judge ripped the prosecutor for playing dirty, and it was quite a moment.
I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. That's basic law. It's been basic law in this country for 40 years, 50 years. I have no idea why you would do something like that. The problem is, this is a grave constitutional violation for you to talk about the defendant's silence. You're right on the borderline, and you may be over, but it better stop.